My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your fate. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing today? On today's show, I am bringing you Reiki Master Bronwen Logan. She, as well as her co-author, Fran Stein, have an updated 20th anniversary edition of a book called the Reiki Sourcebook. We are talking Reiki healing on today's show. Bronwen Logan, welcome to your F.A.T.E, my friend. How you doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks, Christy.
Well, I'd like to really say that I appreciate you coming on the show and spending your time with me. And I am especially interested in this topic because for me, energy healing, Reiki, things of that nature is kind of what prompted me to step on my own spiritual path. I had an illness for a long time. Western medicine wasn't helping me, and I started practicing in the world of energy medicine, and I gained much more improvement than I ever would have had I just stayed with traditional mainstream healing practices. So it's a topic that is near and dear to my own heart, energy healing, Reiki. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I always like to start at the beginning. Can you tell me, how did this become your life's path, your journey? Did you have a spiritual awakening? Or how did you get to be a Reiki master that you are today?
Yeah, okay. Actually, I call myself a Reiki teacher rather
A
than a
Reiki.
Reiki master. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, all those terms, it feels a little highfalutin, like master. I don't know. It's sort of,
Little
but
hierarchical there.
but definitely Reiki teacher, Reiki practitioner. And yeah, I did have well, put it this way, I knew immediately that this was what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to do anything else. So I knew that, and I had, I had gone traveling with my ex-husband Franz, who I wrote the book with, and we were in India, and we had in the end we spent 2 years in India, but after about 1 year, we came across a Reiki teacher, and we had been looking for one because Franz had sciatica, that a pain from your back down through your leg. And, we were carrying backpacks, so we were having a difficult time just getting around. And so in Nepal, actually, it was that we found a Reiki teacher, and we were there for a number of months, and so we did Reiki 1, Reiki 2, and Reiki 3 when we were there. But from the moment I did Reiki 1, just knew it was just like this sense of I didn't before I had done it, I didn't know that I was actually even going to do Reiki 2 or Reiki 3. That wasn't really in my picture at all, but it just sort of really took me as something, because it's so empowering. The idea that we can actually do something for ourselves rather than having to rely on anybody or anything else, then that just reminds us of this inner power that we have for ourselves. So it was very exciting, and I really loved the idea of being able then to pass that on to someone else. And I do remember when being in a bookstore in Nepal after just having done Reiki 3, and that there was this couple, a young couple traveling, just like we were, and they were like, "Oh, let's have a look at the Reiki books. I wonder if we could do Reiki around here." And Franz and I were like, "Gosh." We just sort of learned. So we turned around, we said, "You know what? We just learned how to do this, but we'd love to. Would you be our guinea pigs, like, for our first students?" And they're like, "Yeah." So that's just all happened basically. And then we went to Darjeeling in India, in the Himalayas there, and we opened up a Reiki center. And we went out and we would go and do treatments and classes in the tea plantations, Darjeeling tea, and yeah, and it was really beautiful and a lovely way to be in community with other people as well. So, coming into the community and supporting people who uh, wanted help and weren't sure how to do it. I remember doing Reiki treatments on people who had eye operations. So when these doctors fly in and they will go to a place that where someone doesn't where people don't have a lot of money, and they'll just do a whole bunch of eye operations in one day. And so we were asked to tag along, and we'd do Reiki on everyone after they'd had their operations, and it was just so beautiful. And Indian people, that culture is much more open to something like this. And so, yeah, working with these people, they'd be like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" And it was really encouraging, and I felt like it was a real internment. It was a time where you could really just sort of get into it, and that's all we had to do, and it was just a really beautiful thing to do. And then we came back to Australia, so yeah, and
That
then started a school here.
that sounds like a beautiful life, you know? Practicing Reiki in India, healing people, like, what a journey. It sounds like it's been an amazing journey for you. Um,
Yeah,
for those out there that are maybe into spirituality, but and have heard of Reiki and have heard of that practice, I mean, many it's I feel like things of this nature are becoming more and more mainstream, but there's certainly a lot of people out there that don't know what Reiki healing is or what it entails. Can you talk a little
yeah.
bit about what Reiki healing is, how it helps people, what its origins are, and things of that nature?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, well, that's actually look, I haven't got the new copy of the Reiki Source book yet, but I've got the old one here. That's
Okay.
the old one,
Okay.
and it's 20 years, but, the whole thing of this was that we had all these questions and, the questions that you just asked. So we had all these questions and we wanted to answer them. So we were asking people, started traveling to different places. We ended up going to Japan, because that actually is where the system is from, which we didn't know really when we started. And
I
so
didn't know that
it's
actually either until I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know." Like, there's so much you don't know, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, right? And, so, you know, we in Japan, we got to meet a number of different teachers, but saying that, a lot of the teachers in Japan were teaching sort of like more new agey type practices because the journey of it was that the man who founded it, his name was Mikao Usui, and he was born in 1865. And, he created it for himself, and then, this he was working on himself, put it that way, right? And so he developed, um, these practices for himself, and then people were asking him how to do that. So he would then start sharing that and developing then the system again according to who he was teaching. So, some people like doing meditation practice, other people might like chanting, other people, are more visual. So bringing in different elements to help different people to come into this space that he was in. And uh, the word Reiki is a Japanese word. And, the more research that we did into this, the more it was just like, it's so completely Japanese. It's hilarious that it sort of lost that at one point, and it's definitely coming back. People are much more interested in the Japanese origins these days. But um, I'll just tell you a bit about the history first, and I'll tell you a bit
Yes.
more about what Reiki is. So there was a lady in Hawaii Takata, whose parents were Japanese, and she was born in 1900. She went to Japan in 1936. She was sick, and she met this teacher who taught her Reiki, basically. Yeah. And she stayed there for a year, helping him, doing treatments on people, and he had the first real treatment room ever. And this was a student of the founder. So she came back to Hawaii and she stayed there until she died in 1980. And in that time, she did a lot of treatments and she started teaching people. And she taught 21, 22 teacher students. And they sort of, after she died, they sort of went off in their own directions and they all started doing different things with the system. So she taught them a very simplified system because she was Japanese and being in America at the time of the Second World War. It was not a great time to be Japanese. So she really kept it quite simple. She said that herself. She didn't really bring in the Japanese aspects of it. And she just kept it simple. And so the students that took it away, the teachers, they created their own they filled the holes and a little bit themselves. And a lot of them filled it with sort of new age practices, to be honest. So, yeah. So it did get quite confusing, I'd say, like the 1980s, 1990s. And, I studied it at the end of the 1990s. So that was the time where people were just sort of starting to really question things about it. Where does this practice come from? Why are we doing that? And in going to Japan, it turns out there was an association that still exists in Japan today. And it's been there the whole time. And they have kept up the traditional practices. We've learned a lot through people who are a part of that association and other people who have researched, Reiki in Japan. So what is it? It is, as I said, it's a number of different things. It's about teaching us how to um, strengthen ourselves and come into balance, I think is a really good word. You can also say wholeness because wholeness means, if you say to heal, it means to become whole. And this is a really beautiful way of understanding how we work. So in Japan, they work with the well, they work from an idea of Japanese cosmology, which is that the way that the universe is created. So the universe, they think, from a Japanese Buddhist perspective, we have the earth was first created, and then there was the heavens. So we have the earth and the heavens, these dual elements, and then they come together and they blend together and they create something. What do you think they create, Christy?
Us?
Yes. Perfect. So, and life, right? But definitely
Life.
us. And
Yeah.
so it's like how we are created. And so we see that as the big picture of the universe, but that's on the macrocosm. If we look at the microcosm, look at us. Yeah. Then we can see the same sort of picture inside of us. So we work with this area called the hara in Japan, and it is in the abdomen. And that's sort of like this main core strength. It's our grounding point. It's the energy that our family gives to us and we're born with, put it that way. Yeah. And so we have that. That's the earth. And then the heavens is the head. It's this lovely, spacious, open area that uh, when we blend it together, so we have the heavens and we have the earth blending together, they come together at the heart. And the heart is then that mirror of the universe of us. And it's like the center point of us, our heart based beings that we are. And I think that's a really beautiful way of thinking. And when we work with the system of Reiki, we are actually always balancing these elements together. So, uh, not necessarily from our mind, because if we were just working from our mind, we'd be unbalanced. So, the idea is that we are allowing these elements to find their own way back into balance with each other. When we really sit in that healing space, we just allow that to happen. So, it's a very internal practice, if you like. This is from a Japanese perspective, yeah? So, it's a very internal practice. We don't sort of like try to make things happen. In fact, it's more like just the intention is always to be open to allow whatever needs to happen and allowing the body then to do that. Because if I'm going, oh, I've got a sore shoulder, I need to work on that shoulder. I don't really know why I've got a sore shoulder. And I could try with my mind to try to sort the whole thing out. And yet that's just one aspect of me. Yes. So if I allow all aspects of me to come into balance, then that is naturally going to come back into balance as well. So that's sort of how we see it. But the word Reiki means spiritual energy and or big energy. It's sort of like the energy of everything. That's the idea. So it's like this natural flow that exists in the universe, and we're a part of that. Yeah. And it's also in us and we're in it. So it's quite beautiful. Yeah.
It truly is.
Yeah. I've got one more thing to say about that.
Of course. Please do.
That
I'm
I
all
just
ears.
just that so if we look at it as being that word, yeah, Reiki being spiritual energy, the only thing is it actually doesn't and didn't in Japan either mean that it was a practice. So in Japan, they often use the word ryoho, which means healing method. Okay, so they're like, oh, that's a healing method that uses Reiki. Yeah. And there were other practices, a lot of other practices around in the early 1900s that 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 they talked of using Reiki, but they weren't called Reiki, the practices, if you get what I'm saying, right? So we actually call it the system of Reiki when we're normally talking about it because the system is a number of different practices. And those are the elements that mean that you're working with Reiki. I mean, all of us are Reiki, if you like, if you want to use the Japanese word
Right.
for it. But if you're doing Reiki, yeah, if you're practicing, then you are actually working with those different elements, which it's if you can see what I'm saying, like it's a bit of a different thing. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, yeah, I do Reiki." And what they're meaning is just that they're really connecting to their energy, which is wonderful, right? But are they actually doing this Japanese practice? Well, possibly not. So the system of Reiki is a number of things, and it's hands-on healing, which a lot of people know. Yeah. So the hands-on healing aspect. There's working with mantras and symbols. So these are all different ways of working. Yep. There's working with the precepts. So there's 5 simple guidelines that are given to live a good life. Yeah. And we actually see those precepts as being, if I could be those precepts. So for today only, do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, be honest or true to who I am, and be compassionate. If I could be those things in my life always, then I would be enlightened because I would be in that space of pure energy just flowing and nothing would be impeding that or restricting that. So yeah. So we sort of look at the different elements. So the hands-on healing, the mantras and the symbols, the meditations, and the initiation process, which is called Reiju in Japan. All of those things help us to become the Reiki precepts. So they help us to not be angry. They help us to be more loving and caring and grateful. Yeah. So, uh,
It's really remarkable how much our emotions can play into our overall health too. Being angry, being worried, being stressed
yeah,
can really affect your energy, and that what can lead to dis-ease. That's what disease is. It's dis-ease.
yeah,
Um as far as people looking to seek healing, if they're out there, there's so many people nowadays that are sick. It seems like autoimmune diseases are rampant. Everything from
yeah,
fibromyalgia to MS to
yeah,
Lyme disease to all types of things that are impacting us. And it doesn't seem like Western medicine has a whole lot of ability to alleviate a lot of the symptoms that are coming along with these diagnoses.
yeah.
What do you feel Reiki healing can address most. Is there anything that Reiki Healy is better at addressing than is it more muscle aches, pains? Is it could you what are some of the type of the ailments that you see that really can benefit people that are looking for health relief?
Yeah, yeah. I think, look, I think you're right that there are a lot of people with diseases today that we never really spoke about or recognized. I don't know whether they had them before and we just weren't labeling the things, or whether it's a new, whether it's just more, I really don't know. But um, I can see, a lot of people who come for treatments, that there's most people who come for treatments, Reiki treatments, who are sick will come because they're at the end of their tether. So they've tried a lot of things, yeah, and they haven't found answers. I think that, the thing is that the system of Reiki is not medicine. And, medicine is specifically something that you might take, or, it's something specific that you do this and this happens, is meant to happen, right? It's not like that. And it's very much just about us and ourselves and what happens. And, as a Reiki teacher, practitioner, I'm still going to die, right? So, yeah.
None of us are getting out of here alive.
So that means, I can't change that. And what I can do though is that I can die whole, if you like. You know how I talked before about this way of balancing ourselves out, thinking of ourselves in terms of maybe the body. We can see it in a number of different ways, but we can see it as the body, the mind, and the breath. These correlate to those three things I was talking about before. So the body is like that earth groundingness, also relates to the body. We have the mind, and then we have the breath at the heart. If you think there's, the lungs and but also speech, it's coming out through there. So we see those three elements as sort of balancing things that need to balance as well. And when we are out of balance, that's when we are unwell. So, whatever that unwell is, and for every single person, it's going to be different. It's not like I can say, when I put my hand on here on everybody, this and this is going to happen, because it's not. And that is why it's quite difficult to research something like this, because it's not a pill. It's not something specific that has a specific outcome. And the other thing is that every time that I might have a treatment, for example, it's going to be different, because every time that I come to a treatment, I'm in a different space. I've just read something in the newspaper, or someone's just said something to me, or I've said something to someone else, or so I'm always feeling different, and I'm never the same. There's never a moment in my life which is the same as another moment. So this means that when I'm when I'm having a Reiki treatment, there's going to be different things that are going to be happening inside of me, and different things that are going to be worked on. And it's really about me giving over to that and allowing myself to come back into balance. That's the same when we do the meditations, and I'm sure people who meditate and maybe haven't done Reiki practices will get what I'm saying here. Like, we are always different when we come to our practice. When we go to sit down to meditate, we're always feeling different, and the experience is going to be different each time. So we can't come with an expectation of healing. We come with an expectation of just being there in that moment, and being open to whatever needs to happen in that moment. And the more open that we are to that in ourselves, then the more opportunity we actually have for finding some form of balance in.
I also think that when people are, like you said, coming to experience something like Reiki and they have kind of experienced other things and are at the end of
Yeah.
their rope as far as trying to resolve whatever issue they're having, I experienced this myself. It does allow you to open your mind to other things that you never would have been able to open to before. So I do think
So true.
belief and intention and belief really have a lot to do with healing in general. And that if you're not open to possibilities that are outside of mainstream techniques, it's going to be a more difficult bridge for you to get to. But I do think you end up when, for me anyways, I had to surrender a little bit to my illness, and I had to
Yeah.
almost not give up, but surrender to where I was in that moment and be open to experiencing something else that could work for me, and not labeling it, judging it, or overthinking it, but being just open to receiving in a state of allowing. And really, you got to be in a headspace that you want to heal and you want to be whole again, which sometimes means addressing old issues, old baggage, old ways of thinking, and kind of rebooting your mental well being, your state, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true, and we can only be where we are in this moment as well,
Yes.
we aren't anywhere else, and the acceptance of that, I think, is really important. Um, we may not be in the best space every moment of our life, you know, and, so yeah, finding ways of, and there's lots of different ways. There are lots of different practices that you could do, as you say, with energetic healing uh, to support yourself. But I do find, and with belief and faith, I find that that is really powerful when it comes from inside us.
It really is like much more powerful than people give it credit to it. Like the power of your
Yeah.
brain, our minds and our subconscious and our brains are so much more powerful. And when you truly believe it, you can kind of make the most magical things happen in the most, you know, metaphysical way. you
I
know,
love it.
it's
I really love the word of
fascinating.
magic. Yeah,
It's
because,
magic. It really
magic.
is.
Yeah. And people think, magic is something like with a wand and you make something happen. But in reality, everything about life is magical and each moment is magical because it's all so unique and different. Tapping into that feeling of that is something that is going to help you to really be appreciative and grow, that sense
Yeah.
of gratitude for the moment and what it is, and that it is totally unique. There is nothing like each second, and to be in that and to have that sense of joy in that moment, even if it's something that's shitty, even if it's
Yes.
something that's awful, but just knowing that, well, that is what happens, right? Because life is not like this, and
Yeah.
so y yeah,
It's what makes
it's
life
gonna be.
exciting, the ebbs and
Yeah,
flows of
and
life. We're here to learn and experience, and that means you got to experience bad and good. It can't be all,
yeah,
uh, you know,
no,
it's how you learn and grow. Um, how do you, one of the things that your book talked about a little bit is the practice of self healing. I didn't even understand fully that you could practice Reiki on yourself. I thought you had to
yeah.
be administered Reiki basically. I didn't realize you could learn the practice and administer your own self-healing. Um let's talk a little bit about the practice of self-healing. Amazing.
I know, it's amazing. Christy, I sort of had a beginning thing like you when the first time, I mean, I studied lots of different classes eventually. That was sort of my thing. And, that's where the book came from, finding out different things. But the first class that I had, I didn't really understand that either. And I didn't understand the power of the precepts and, just these simple guidelines, how powerful that was. And I think just that there was this time where people thought that, Reiki was all about hands-on healing,
Yes.
treatments and on others. And then going back into it, realizing that it all sort of began with self-healing. And from self-healing, then it came out. In fact, there is a little manual that the association in Japan have, and they have this question and answer in the back of it with the founder of the system. And he says in that question and answer, he says, if you can't heal yourself, how can you heal others? I mean, we've often heard that before, but I think it's a really good point. If we're not working on ourselves, how on earth can we show up for other people? We
Yeah.
cannot. Even doing a treatment for other people, I'm going to bring my own crap into that treatment, right?
Yeah.
My own judgments. And, so I need to work on myself so that I can be a more whole, balanced individual to be there for other people. And, we often talk about it as shining your light, right? So in Reiki, we have in the third level, we have this symbol and mantra, and it means great bright light. It's just Japanese kanji, and it means great bright light. And being that great bright light is really, if I work with the precepts, it allows me to be that great bright light. And so I'm doing that for myself. But in doing that for myself, you're shining it onto the world around you. So we really want to be able to become that great bright light. And we can only do that through self practice. So in the system of Reiki, we have a number of things. We have, like I said, meditations. There was something I forgot to tell you before. When I was talking about the precepts, there's also Japanese poetry. They used to use Japanese poetry in the early 1900s, which was written by the emperor and the
Oh, wow.
empress. And that it's called waka, which means Japanese poetry or Japanese song. And it's the oldest form of poetry in the world, apparently. So it's quite short and it has a certain amount of syllables in it. But it's about nature and they write them to help you find out more about yourself. Like there's these, in Zen Buddhism, they have Japanese koans, which are these questions that you sort of have to ponder. It's the same sort of idea. So you've got this poetry that when you read it, you think, well, it's quite simple. But then when you start to pull it apart, you start to find all this depth in it and meaning in it. And once again, it's about working on yourself. So, like the precepts giving you guidelines, so working mentally, the poetry also gives you contemplative tools. And they used to include it in meditation. So, you'd sort of go into a meditative space and then contemplate the poetry. In fact, the martial artists of that time, they used to go out on full moons and they would, these big martial artists, and they'd go out and they'd recite poetry to the moon.
I love
So
that
it's a
though.
very, I know, it's lovely.
I
It's
love
such a
that.
different sort of way of being with words. And the Japanese think that, words are very magical actually, and that, they carry spirit with them, which is why we also have the mantras and the symbols. So mantras we can chant. Yep. We can also chant the precepts too. The symbols, we can draw symbols. So it's another way, it's a more visual way, a physical way of trying to tap into energy and to shift and move energy to bring us back into balance. And then we have hands on healing, which, as you say, we can do that on ourselves. And we do it all the time. I mean, touch,
Yes.
is the most magical thing.
Yes.
And if someone is upset, what do? We hug them, we hold them, we share that physicality with them. A baby, we hold a baby. If a baby isn't held, it actually has physical and mental issues growing up because things haven't come together for it.
Yeah.
As humans, we are physical beings, and we need to be together physically. So it's really tapping into the idea of that, once again, a natural thing, but bringing that into a practice. So certain ways of working with that and using that. Yeah.
What do you feel like the future of medicine is? Because the more I am walking in this direction of spirituality and energy medicine and healing, I feel like Reiki healing, quantum healing, things of this nature is really eventually going to be what we Western medicine
Sure.
will be good for when you break your leg or if you need a heart transplant or something of that nature. Works great for that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
for a lot of what seems to be ailing people today in this society, I feel like energy medicine is the best way to get dramatic healing without having to be like on an antidepressant for a long term or maybe a painkiller for long term or things that Western medicine can give you that mask symptoms but don't really cause true healing in one. What do you think the
Yeah.
future? Do you think we're heading in that? I, what do you feel about that?
It's interesting, isn't it? You know, I
Yeah,
well, when I look at how the body heals, and I think that's a really interesting place to start. So how do we heal? You know, if I cut my finger, um, what happens, you know? And or maybe I get a splinter in my finger. That's probably, an even better one because, there's something happening in there, but the body knows how to eject that thing, and it does certain ways of, it's got little methods of doing that. Like it'll create like pus around it to help it to push it out, and um when the body is healing, how it sews itself back together. And and it puts a little scab over the top to make sure that here's your little Band-Aid. You're gonna be safe, and we're gonna make it all good underneath there. And when it's time, the body knows to release that. I mean, it is phenomenal that we have these natural abilities to heal inside of us. And I think medicine probably could pay more attention to that. And look, I'm sure I'm no doctor, obviously, and I'm sure that uh, I feel like that the future of medicine is shifting and changing. I feel like they are paying more attention to things like that. Recently, I had 2 hip replacements, and, I'm fairly young, but it's a hereditary thing that I had, and it wore away to the point that, I was having trouble walking on both hips, and, the the way that the surgeon worked was really unique. He came in through the side of the hip, and, there is a scar that's about that long, and he didn't cut through any muscles or anything like that. He moved everything aside and fixed the hip, came back out, sewed it up, and I could walk straight after I had the hip replacement. I mean, it's
it's amazing.
absolutely amazing. And this is because he's in the olden days, they'd go in, they just slice through everything, and then it'd take you months to get better. And so it's a very, I feel like that we are appreciating the body more. We're appreciating the finesse of the body, and we're using the body's own ability to actually heal itself. And that is what the system of Reiki is about. It's about supporting that self healing. So, though, I'm sure that surgeon doesn't is not interested in the system of Reiki, but I feel like there are connections. I feel like there's some sort of understanding that we can do things better and we can do things for the body we can stimulate the body's self healing rather than us actually, like the word you used before, and it was a good word. I've forgotten what it is, but where you cover something over, like a
Mask the
Panadol.
symptoms. Yeah, yeah.
You mask. Yeah.
Mask the symptoms. Yeah,
How do we really know what's going on when we're masking things? We don't, which is why we have fever,
yeah,
because fever tells us there's something happening, and it also stimulates the body's healing system to get going.
yep.
So, um, just having a better understanding of that, and I think I feel like the medical system is, it's moving into the future. I feel like they are definitely looking at the human body in different ways and finding, ways to work with the body rather than against the body. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am hoping that the future of medicine does start to incorporate more of our whole bodies rather than just looking at us as the material that we are, the atoms, the
Yeah.
chemicals, and everything. That there is energy. We are energy. Everything is energy and consciousness. And to address our energy is addressing our health. You know, if your energy is off balance, that is going to be at the what lies beneath all, not all, but
Yeah.
a lot of ill health out there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like in order to be a really good Reiki practitioner, do you have or the need to be a little bit intuitive, to be able to tune into somebody else's energy, to be able to sense energy? I'm finding that some people are able to pick up on energy more than others. Do you feel like
Mm.
the Reiki practice needs somebody that is going to be a little bit on the intuitive side as far as being able to feel
It's
energy
interesting.
more?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at people who come to a Reiki 1 class, yeah, you're gonna get people of all different types, and some people come because someone has said to them, "Oh, you should, learn Reiki. It'd be really good for you." Often tarot readers tell tell people to go and have Reiki classes for whatever reason. And then there's people who've had experiences of energy work, and they're like, "Oh, this is interesting. I don't know what to do with this. I'm not sure what's happening, and I'd like more of a structure around that." You'll find lots of different reasons why people come. So when you're in a class, they're actually all going to be quite different abilities as well. So like we were saying before, we're different. Each one of us is different, and each one of us is also in a different place each time. So there's so many variabilities. There's not really it's not like if we all go to learn, say we all speak Spanish and we all go to learn English, we're all at the same point because we don't know any English, right? It's not like that. And it means that, some people are going to have a lot better understanding of Spanish. Maybe they have a feel for Spanish or English, I
Mhm.
should say, around the other way. So it's just going to depend upon each individual. So you need to treat each person individually and think of them by themselves. Then it it can be difficult for people when they start comparing themselves to other people,
Mm,
because then they're going to think, oh yeah, they're really good at this, I'm not very good at this, because the mind, our worthiness, and there's a whole lot of stuff that can come into that, and it can actually bring that up as well when we're working in this sort of practice. It can our vulnerabilities can come up, and especially in a class, people can feel, um people might it we might they might allow tender spots to be touched inside of them, and that can sort of, trigger things for people. So being very aware of each person as an individual and allowing each person to grow in their own way that they need to, that's going to be different. And also, people come to classes with different reasons. They might be coming because their dad's sick, yeah,
yeah.
or maybe they're sick, or maybe they just love doing meditation practice and they're looking for a different way of doing that. Or so there's going to be lots of different reasons as well. So as far as intuition goes, yeah, um, I I would say that it just depends on the individual, and it's not. Once again, you were saying before, it's not good. The good and bad things. It's all a bit relative. It doesn't matter whether someone is more intuitive than another person in a way, because everyone's going to learn in their own time, and the more that we do it, the more that we can let go into it. I always think that the most important thing that you can do when you learn the system of Reiki is to let go, because we
Yes.
hold on to all these expectations about ourselves, what's going to happen, what people think. We have all these expectations, but if we can let go of that stuff, then we can just really be open to the experience and do whatever needs to be done. And you can call that intuition if you like.
Fair enough. Fair enough. If people are out there looking, because I live in Los Angeles, so there's a lot of people that are working in the healing arts in the particular area that I live in. But
Yep.
for listeners in general, if they're looking for a Reiki healer in their area, how would one find out whether, I'm sure not all Reiki healers are the same. Is there anything people should look out for in particular when finding a good practitioner in their area that would be able
Yeah.
to support them in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
healing? What types of
I think
things?
we all have different things we like, you know. So, for example, I might be really into crystals. Yeah. If I'm really into crystals, maybe I could find a Reiki teacher who works with crystals, for example. Yeah. But maybe I'm really into like a more I like cultural stuff. So maybe then you'd be really into finding out about the Japanese origins and excuse me. And just sort of going into that aspect of it more. And I think for everybody there's something because there are a lot of Reiki teachers out there and they tend to because it's an energetic practice. Yes, there are specific elements that we need to do. So, we need to have a hands-on aspect, meditation aspect, symbols and mantras, the initiation practice and precepts. That needs to be a part of it. Yeah. But apart from that, we can move into whatever area interests us. And I always say word of mouth is probably the best thing, to be honest,
And
because
and I kind of love that. I don't think I quite understood till right this second, having this discussion, that you really can do the foundational things within Reiki, and then you can build on your own, what you resonate with the most as far as your own spirituality and what you are drawn to, and create not your own practice but your own way of being within that practice, which that's a beautiful thing right there, you
yeah, I
know.
think so too. And, it has taken so many routes, this practice over time. And it's managed to survive through that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think just having that, like the groundwork, always having the groundwork, and not trying to, I thought that was really great what you said. You don't need to create like a new system. I think a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to make a new system. Don't need to do that. I think it's very much informing people, keeping informed as to what you're doing. And, I teach, the system of Reiki. It's a Japanese practice, but I really am attracted to I don't know what else. I mean, it could be anything, but, something else energetic, and I like to include that into my class, and just tell people what you do. Don't be ashamed, be open,
Yep.
and, be clear, be transparent, and people will be attracted to you according to what their own, interests are.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Reiki Sourcebook. What can
Yeah.
readers expect? Um, is it for all levels? Is it for practitioners mainly? What can readers expect from the 20th anniversary edition of this book?
Yeah. Well, um look, it was not it's a sort of a bit of a different Reiki book. It's not like a lot of Reiki books are just Reiki 1 manuals or Reiki 2 manuals or something like that, right? Which is fine. So they're like what you would teach in a class, and then people get them published. This is not like that. It does go through different elements that you would learn in a class, but it's so much more than that. And it's obviously chock a block full with historical information, factual information, and it has all these practices in here. So I don't know if you can see that, but like all these different practices, and they're from different types of Reiki, like I was saying, not just from Japanese practices, all the different things that you might learn, and it'll tell you where that comes from.
Mm.
So you might be thinking, oh, I do this practice. I don't know why I do this practice. How does it fit into all of this? It'll tell you the origins of that, who introduced it, why they introduced it. It'll tell you about all the different types of Reiki that there are, like the different sorts of systems that exist. And you can find yourself in there in some way, which is really beautiful. So, who is it for? You can read it as a beginner, because the first half of it, say, is very much information that will really support you in possibly finding a teacher because you're much more informed. Yep. And if you've done a class, it'll really just back up the information that you learn in a class. But I always say that I find this book, the best book is for like as a reference material. So if you were a practitioner or a teacher and you need to know something, there is this glossary in the back and it goes on for pages and pages and pages. And you can look stuff up really quickly. And then you can find it in more detail in the book. So that might be, different symbols that have been added into the system of Reiki, or different personalities that have taught within the system of Reiki and what they've brought into it. And not just from a Japanese perspective, also from a more Western perspective as well. So the idea is that it was a bit like an encyclopedia, I guess, but it's not written like A to Z. The glossary is, yes, but the book itself is more informative in a way than that. Or maybe it's like, I don't know if you remember this. I don't know how old you are, Christy, but we used to have this thing called the Encyclopedia Britannica,
Oh,
right?
of course.
Which
Yes.
was
I remember those. Yes.
now that was enormous, of course, but as far as Reiki goes, that was sort of the intention behind creating this, that you'd be able to find whatever you needed to find in here. And that it wasn't related to just what I taught or, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. So it was a really different book. And that's why it's been, so many people have used it as that. And, it sits on people's bookshelves waiting to be pulled out to be
Yeah.
something to be checked or looked up or, and I think it's perfect.
I mean, Reiki is huge in LA. I'm sure it's huge in Australia, but particularly where I live, there's a lot of
Yeah.
Reiki healers. There's a community, a spiritual community here in LA that's pretty big. So I've met quite a few practitioners just along the way of my years being here in Los Angeles. So it's very popular, probably because it works. you know, things
That's it.
because it works, and as much
Yeah.
as maybe mainstream science or mainstream people don't want to are slowly coming around to it, at the end of the day, this type of healing is hugely beneficial for us. And I love the way that I wish that people had more time to truly contemplate Japanese poetry or question who we are or get involved in the interior of one's mind to be more philosophical. But we live in such a
Yeah.
highly distracted world that it feels like nobody has the tendency or the inclination to really sit within themselves. And energy healing, energy work really gives you the opportunity to like put a different head on your shoulders and kind of look within rather than worry about all the exterior things that we have going on in our lives from the day to day, you know?
Well, interestingly, I mean, you talk about Japanese poetry. I actually have, there's a book here, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
called Bridge on the Shikishima Way, 100 Poems by Emperor Meiji. So this is the emperor who wrote the poems that Mikao Sui used. And this is translated by an American man, and he's 92.
Oh, wow.
And I know, and he's been doing it for like 30 years. And like some of the poems, he said it would take him like 1 year to be able to translate one poem that's five lines long, right? And he's also got a book for the Empress as well, which I have. It's a beautiful book too. So, that I think there's something in us, we pulled away from a lot of these things, and we didn't have good translations either. A lot of the translations, well, in fact, I'd say most of the translations that have existed up until now have not been great because the Japanese language of the early 1900s was written with different kanji, the writing, and it was much more complex than modern Japanese. So modern Japanese people can't really even read the old Japanese writing.
Interesting.
So it is quite difficult to get really good translations, and he's got these beautiful translations. They're the official translations of the poems, the official English translations. So, you know, I think it's beautiful that people are coming back around to that, and I love practicing that. And in fact, I have a course on my website, which is Reiki with Bronwen, and it's called Waka Wisdom. Waka is the Japanese poems, and it's 21 days of contemplation through poems.
Oh, I love
Um,
I will put that
yeah,
in the show notes so people
yeah,
can, like, have access to that if it resonates with them because I love that.
yeah,
Do
it is really beautiful because it looks at like it gives little history each day, gives a new poem each day, it gives a recorded meditation on that each day, and thoughts to, things to think about to go deeply into each of the poems. So
I
yeah,
love
it's
that.
beautiful.
What's your website one more time?
It's Reiki with Bronwen.
I will definitely put that in the show notes along with your book so people can access it and resource it. Now, do you only teach in person or do you do remote teaching? Do you do teaching online?
Yeah, I do. I think as far as that goes, I mean, obviously COVID changed a lot of things for people. I think a lot of people who didn't teach online before started teaching online. I think if you're going to do a Reiki 1 course, this is just a bit of advice for people out
Yes.
there, then I would suggest probably doing that in person because there's gonna be a Reiki teacher near you, and you know what? You can have as many Reiki teachers as you like, right? There's not like there's some loyalty program that you get fixed into, and you're gonna learn different things from different people, different ways. So, I think that that's a great thing to do, learn it in person first because you want the confidence, and don't do a course that's like 3 hours long, right? Take a longer course because you want to learn how to be confident to place hands on yourself and know that you're not looking like an idiot when you're doing it. Because, sometimes that's where we go first, right? Rather than sitting back and relaxing into that and being confident with that. And then being confident to place your hands on other people like friends and family. So do something in person. And then, I think you can play with it really because it's an energetic practice. For example, every Friday in Australia, it's Thursday elsewhere in the world. I do in the morning a 15-minute reiju and an initiation practice online. And I have students all over the world, and we all connect, and it's really beautiful to have that time that people put aside 15 minutes a week just to sit together in an energetic space together. It's energy work, right? So it's not like we have to be together, in person. We can let go of that and we can be together in that. And I think for, other Reiki classes, sure, you could go online, you could do more in person. You can try everything out and see how it works. I mean, one of the main things that we work with within the system of Reiki is distance healing. And the whole concept of that is that the person is not there with you, right? So, I mean, it's a part of the practice that we believe that we are all energetically connected, that we all exist and shift and move together in this world. And I talked at the very beginning of this about, being the universe. So we have the universe, but we are a part of that universe. We're not something separate and outside of it.
Yeah.
So we exist within that universe and we all exist in that together. And there is this ultimate interconnectedness that just exists that we just are. And, if you're feeling bad, Christy, and we're chatting together, I can feel that, that's just
Yeah.
normal. We
Yep.
feel this, we know these things. And there's so much that if we let go of expectations, that letting go again as well. If we let go of all of that and just be with each other, it doesn't matter whether we're in the same room together or on the other side of the world. Yeah.
It's so,
So
so true.
great.
We are
We are.
absolutely connected. And I think that is maybe one of the biggest hurdles when it comes to remote healing that people seem to really start understanding. I know for me, I used to do kinesiology, remote, and
Yeah,
I would physically be able to feel the movement
that's
of my
amazing.
energy through him
Yeah,
working. I mean, and it really does it you cannot help but to completely change your perspective on everything that you were taught based on having what you now know is energy moving within your body remotely by somebody that you're speaking to on the phone. You just it just switch you automatically go, "Oh yeah, I really don't know what's going on. There's lots of stuff that I don't know." And as long as you can be open-minded to that, like, you know, it can really change your whole existence, open your for me, walking into spirituality and coming into all these different concepts of energy healing and spirituality and plant medicine journeys, and there's so much out there. It's really broadened my perspective on everything in my life. But I'm always in healing. I feel like I'm always in a state of healing. I'm always
Uh,
looking for new ways to heal. So,
yeah,
I'm really grateful that you came on the show today to talk about Reiki healing, because it is something that absolutely works. It will not only heal your body, but open your mind to new ways of living in the world, which is also, I
yeah,
think, a beautiful thing.
absolutely. Yeah.
If
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on the show. If people want to reach out to you, is Reiki with Bronwen the
Yeah,
best way to do that? If they want maybe
absolutely.
some advice, maybe they're a practitioner, maybe they're looking for some guidance in your world, I will put that in the show notes, gang. And I will put your book, the Reiki Sourcebook, in the show notes as well, so people can click on that and pick it up. And I would love to thank you for coming on the Fate podcast today.
Thank you, Christy.
It was
Yeah.
a true pleasure. I loved our conversation. Alrighty, gang. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I want to thank you, Bronwen. And we will see you next week on Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. Journey well, everyone. Bye bye. Alrighty, guys. That is a wrap on this episode of Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to thank Bronwen for coming on and spending her time with me. And I was really glad that I had the opportunity to interview someone like her who's been teaching something like Reiki for so long. And I would highly recommend that if you are out there and you are struggling with health issues, symptoms, and Western medicine isn't giving you the kind of relief or the answers that you're looking for, you should really try something like going to see a Reiki practitioner and seeing what they can do for you. It really may very well open some health doors that you didn't even know were there, to allow you to feel a lot better than you do today. So, no matter what you have, I can guarantee you this: after sitting with a good Reiki practitioner for a few sessions, you are going to feel better no matter what, if you've never sat with one before. So I would check it out. It really helped me get back on my feet and start feeling much, much better than anything that was happening from mainstream science health world. So as often as I can, I would love to have Bronwen back and talk about Reiki and what it can do for people. And I did not know that it was originally a Japan practice. No idea. It is very new agey, especially out here in Los Angeles. Alrighty, guys. I'm going to call it there. I will put all of Bronwen's information in the show notes. Her website is reikiwithbronwen.com if you're interested in reaching out to her for any kind of insights into Reiki world. I will put the book in the show notes as well, the Reiki Sourcebook. So pick it up. And as always, I can be reached on Instagram at F.A.T.E podcast. Go ahead and follow the show. I do post little clips and whatnot and so on. Probably not as often as I should. What else? Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to me. I hope you're enjoying what I'm offering here on this show. And if you do, tell a friend. Like, subscribe, do something to support the show. I would love that. It would mean the world to me. And with that, everyone, welcome to your fate. I'll see you next week.